Man, I love Deep Rock Galactic, although maybe not as much as this guy. I mean, the classes, the weapons, the missions, the mollies, the smallies, the drinks, the community, everything, honestly. I love all the core memories that I formed playing this game with friends. I'm kind of addicted with the variety of team compositions that you can craft. I love the dopamine rush of direct impacting my scout.
Yo, Eno Pearl hit!
Fucking what?
I was mining the Eno Pearl.
Yo, Eno Pearl here explodes. You know what?
Oh my god, someone please clip that. Someone please clip that.
I mean, direct impacting a dangerous bug. And the amount of life that just seeps out of this world in general is fantastic. I love how this game looks, I love how it plays, and I especially love how it sounds. From the expertly crafted battle cries of each enemy, to the cranking of each mechanism and mechanical gear that makes up the weapons you carry into battle, to the thing that you're probably all here for, the soundtrack. The soundtrack that invites you to explore every inch of Hoxxes and find fascination in these caves, but not too much fascination lest you be led to a quick and painful death. The soundtrack that accompanies you on your journey and assures you that you're not alone, until they have to bluntly remind you that you're not alone. The soundtrack that has to obligatorily put a third thing in this list, because it wouldn't be much of a proper list otherwise, but I'm looking through here and it seems like I'm missing something, so we'll come back to that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Deep Rock Galactic. The space rig. My absolutely dreaded fucking nightmare away from home. Honestly, I love how this music sounds when paired with the generally low maintenance stuff going on here. It's a slow day here in the space rig because everybody's out there risking their lives for a little bit of gold. This is one of the few songs to be strictly ambient, with no real rhythm to speak of, with each passing note showing itself for only a moment before fizzling out into nothing. Really, the only super salient thing here is the occasional sweeping, droning bass that has a filter modulation to give it some real grit. In a place as chill and quiet as the space rig, it's perfectly fine to have a song that fits with the vastness, and doesn't really intrude much while you're either waiting to assemble your squad, or are waiting for your fourth teammate to come back, or are waiting for your fourth teammate to finish their build, or are waiting for your fourth team. Additionally, sitting here at this window and taking in the music really helped me open my eyes to just how massive this rig is, as well as how massive the planet is that we're taking on. Yeah, I know celestial bodies are supposed to be big, no fucking duh, but you don't get to see it much from a perspective like this. And somehow this song is the thing that really opened my eyes to it. This is the stupidest shit you'll hear from me all day. This is probably one of the only songs in the history of ever that'll actually be better when you have a bad internet connection. And the reason I say that is because, as far as I can tell, this song is supposed to play when you're loading into a multiplayer session or are just generally loading into a mission, which normally takes like 30 seconds, even with a not so optimal internet connection, and yet the song is over 5 minutes long. But if we've learned anything about these video game soundtracks thus far, this song probably wasn't made with the footnote that, hey, we just need a quick song for when you load into a mission. And yet the song still keeps a lot of these spacey vibes that one would expect to hear while they watch the cutscene of your drop pod being launched into space. It sounds really silly for me to say this because this is, a fucking space exploration game, but sometimes while you're playing and you're stuck in the deep dark caverns, you don't really get the same feeling of being in outer space quite as much as, when you compare it to seeing the vastness of space around you in the hub area or while launching straight into a mission. The tinny piano that's playing here gives me heavy Silent Hill vibes, but the weird thing is that I've never actually played the games or seen any of the movies, and so you're probably wondering why I'm saying that, and it's really not that deep. I just sampled some of their music a few years ago, and I actually have a Snapchat recording that I made of when I was actually doing it. When I say Silent Hill vibes, I not only mean that for the tone of the piano that's being played, but it's also the notes that are being played. They're really sparse, and their intervals are kind of scary sounding. Not like you're really getting scared too much by the bugs in this game, unless of course you're playing without a headlamp. And I think this track is actually excellent proof of the music taking itself a lot more seriously than the game is taking itself. I think the premise of this game has its moments of seriousness, basically being forced to work under supercapitalism and put your lives at risk every single time you step foot into a drop pod, but in practice, the dwarfs do nothing but banter back and forth with each other, and even Mission Control, the guy who's micromanaging everything you're doing, is also just constantly making fun of you and the other people that you're playing with. But taking a look at the soundtrack that's playing during all of this, almost every piece reflects the real horrors that the characters have to witness. It reflects the real danger of the caves that you're exploring, and the real consequences that are at stake with every mission you take. It also just does a great job at conveying the vastness of space, as I mentioned earlier, with a lot of the elements slightly bending with each other. Not enough to become muddy or incoherent or anything, but just enough to have everything flow like a river out in the middle of space. Wait, hold on, that's not how that works. Once this song ditches that tinny piano and replaces it with this more plucky synth sort of sound, it takes away a lot of that really creepy horror movie sort of energy that the song had, and instead replaces it with that like high-tech futuristic feeling, but it still sounds weirdly desolate in a way. I wouldn't call it evil, I would almost call it like depressingly desolate in a way, like you've just given up on everything because the world is ending or something. When you consider the fact that bass usually takes up like this much of the frequency spectrum, it's no wonder that people tell you not to put reverb on your basses. Putting reverb on anything is a tricky ordeal because you usually want the element in question to feel like it's taking up more space. So what better way to do that than to make it sound like it's literally bouncing around an empty room? But doing that with your bass is a great way to make sure that you hear very little of everything else because of the deep low frequencies of a bass. They generally are very overpowering and very overbearing if they are either too much louder than the other elements or if they're not very clean in their sound profile. Normally, that is an incredibly bad thing, but in this case, because the bass is playing just staccato notes, you avoid the issue of muddiness while still retaining some of that overwhelming feeling, once again feeding into the looming threat of the planet itself posing a death threat to you. So essentially what I'm saying here is that the overwhelming nature of bass is actually a really good thing in a situation like this, if I'm gonna assume that they're trying to convey some kind of feeling of overwhelming nature. Because the notes almost never change in their rhythm or in the notes being played, it feels like the musical equivalent of getting beaten while you're already down. You're already at least feeling moderately threatened by the inhabitants of this planet, and the staccato notes just keep beating that feeling into your head with every hit. you finally incorporate some more musical elements into the fray, they all give the feeling of exploring a place with a tragic history, with only so much knowledge as to what made it the way it is. Think of something like exploring a once sprawling and lively town. Unbeknownst to you, the plague that took its toll and ravaged every last being. In this case, both the characters and the players should very much be in tune with the situation at large, making everything feel just that much more tense. The sweeping bass that comes in gives heavy, you've been spotted by this scarily advanced security system, and by this point in the soundtrack, we know that the rival mining company had not yet been introduced to the game. Its smooth gliding nature really offers up a different feeling than what we've been hearing so far, and while the first half of the song has a looming threat sound to it, the sliding bass notes straight up sound evil at times. This is what they meant when they said gut-punching dwarven music, or whatever the fuck they said on the Deep Rock Galactic music page. The filter-sweeping stings kind of sound like a type of alarm, like as if you're the last line of defense against the dreaded bugs. Although I guess technically you're totally not, because you could just die and then the next set of gamers have to come down here onto that mission and finish what you couldn't. When the song pulls back a lot of that really big synth bass and a lot of that big synth action and pulls it away from you, keeps it a little bit more low-key with those synth plucks, it kind of gives like a bit of a fearful nature. Not like super horror or super horrifying or anything like that, but almost like, as the name implies, Attack of the Glyphids, it's almost like you came down here and nobody told you what was actually supposed to contest you while you were mining for materials. So you're just going through and doing your thing, and then you're all of a sudden like, what the fuck? What the hell are all these things? Why do they have so many legs and they're biting me? And is that one shooting shit at me? Stop it, knock it off. I really love these metallic hits on the downbeat because they really fit in with the whole dwarven aspect that this entire game predicates upon, as well as the industrial theme as seen in somewhere like a Morkite extraction mission. I might as well mention this now before we get too out of hand. Deep Rock's music is split up into a few subcategories. Stuff that I classify as ambient music that just plays while you're in the caves, music that plays when it's time to bunker down and get shit done, and like 3 more or something, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. I really like the subtle tom sounding things that hit on your left and right side, because it's not every day that you hear a composer or a producer play with panning, much less with their drums, and even less so aggressively. The build-up to almost all of these battle themes are honestly pretty cool, because they kind of strike that feeling that you would see in an action movie, where you'd expect the camera to pan around to see all of the main characters in a line getting ready for the fight ahead of them. Gunner spinning up his minigun, engineer constructing his turrets, scout reloading his shotgun, and driller cranking up his drills. That's not even including how pretty this build-up sounds just to drop straight into this really strong downbeat. There's something so incredibly visceral feeling about music designed to help you keep up the energy and never back down in a horde shooter like this, and there's a reason why people regard this as some of the best music in any game of its type. It also took me until right now to understand the pun behind the name of the song, Hold My Beard. I kind of just assumed it was like a dwarven joke, and, you know, to their credit, it still mostly is, but like, Hold My Beard is a play on words of hold my beer, as in hold my beer while I go do this absolutely stupid fucking thing, and most of the time, it'll probably just end up working out. That really fits with the energy, I think. I ain't no coward, so I will be crossing this cavern. First try, no less.
There we go. I single-handedly got the distro objective done. I'm carrying.
Yes.
Oh, God.
That was... What did you do?
Okay, so if you look above me, you will see that there was a pipe that I tried pressing E on, and then I, like, physicsed off of it and landed in the hole instead. Alright, never mind, I fucked up. I'm gonna need you to bear with me here. This is a really long-winded example. Listen to the resonant synth sweeps. To me, they trigger a very specific sense memory of having the camera be positioned from the POV of one person, only to then pan the camera around to them, and then shift the perspective to a different person like miles and miles away from them. There's tons of things that can be taken from any of the ambient tracks in this game. The sound design being very in tune and thematically appropriate with the game, the composers being incredible at creating soundscapes, the songs not being too intrusive while you explore the endless depths, and the sheer skill required to both comfort you and also make you feel uneasy. For me, this song perfectly captures that idea I spoke about earlier about supercapitalism and basically being sent down on your own death march. The first couple of minutes hit this note of evil at the hands of people perfectly capable of not committing said evil. You get down to your, 112th mission for Deep Rock Galactic, the company, and upon seeing what's in front of you, you almost have to stop and ask yourself, why do I even fucking bother sometimes? The obvious answer is because this game is fucking awesome to play, but within the context of the game's universe, you almost can't be mad, because being upset will get you nowhere, and you will have wasted all that negative energy just to potentially get mauled to death. But to assume that one person wouldn't at least be annoyed by the situation is not looking deep enough into it. Or maybe I'm just looking too much into it. I also really like this little horror movie sounding stinger that you get every couple of minutes. It's nothing that really strikes heavy horror movie vibes, but the intervals being played at least kind of sound like something you'd hear in like a Luigi's Mansion game, or something a little bit more goofy, some other slightly goofy horror game that is just trying to give you a cheap scare or two. I just had a bit of a brain blast moment now with that white noise that hits on the downbeat to sort of transition into that next section. Earlier I spoke about a song taking itself incredibly seriously and really putting into perspective how freaky and how dangerous these situations are that you find yourself in, but that white noise is almost like a signaling of you as the player coming back to reality and actually remembering just how dangerous things are, and that even if you are a professional and you're likely not going to get caught out in those dangerous situations, the danger really never goes away. I really love the rush rhythm at the beginning of this track. While it still retains all the gut-punching energy of any of the other battle themes, this one feels a bit more, mobile? Urgent, maybe? Yeah, we'll go with urgent. This specific theme has a greater feeling of urgency. Be it urgency to run the fuck away from whatever you're fighting, or maybe to run down one of the created paths to group with your other teammates to slay the incoming hordes. This pared down section with just a synth and a bass really highlights a specific characteristic of a lot of this music, which is that it just sometimes sounds kind of weird. Like the synths just sound kind of weird. They don't really feel like anything specific. Once they bring the drums back, the rush rhythm of the synth actually makes the snare placement sound like it's off by a beat, which gives the section a very interesting head nod. A lot of these things you don't tend to notice when you're slaying bugs, which is making them that much more interesting to hear when you take them out of their hectic battlefield context, and sometimes it even sounds like listening to an entirely new song, and that's what I'm here for. Then we bring back that reverberation of the bass, which again, tiny bit overwhelming, but they kind of offset that by having the reverberation lead into it just sort of fizzling out into nothing, like the bass just sort of disintegrated in front of your eyes, before moving on to one more little weird synth riff section with just a kick drum and maybe a tom. And I'm realizing now that the drums are very set in stone. It's the synth riff that feels kind of off and gives it a weird syncopated feel. So retract what I said earlier. There is something so stagnant feeling about this battle theme. And no, I'm not going to pull some shit like what I've been pulling in the past, saying, guys, it's funny because the name of the track is Petrified Fury, kind of like how a statue would be petrified, so it's no wonder it's stagnant. Because no, that would just be too easy and also wouldn't really make any fucking sense. That said, what the stagnation does sound like to me is almost a bit comedic in a way. It kind of sounds like something you'd see in an action movie where, say, a nearly unstoppable force is very slowly walking towards the main character or characters, while you watch all of them unload more bullets into the thing than they have combined brain cells, while the unstoppable force is, well, not stopping. Or like that one part in Man of Steel where Superman is walking towards all those guys and all the bullets are just deflecting off of him. The only difference between these two examples in this case is that because the music sounds a little bit threatening, it's almost closer to that of a horror movie version of the former example provided. The deep rock equivalent of like Jason Voorhees walking towards one of the main characters while someone else is trying to bonk him over the head with a shovel, and you can clearly see that Jason is not fazed. Eventually, all of this adds up to put the main character in a position of so much fear that the only thing they know how to do is keep shooting, or keep standing there and doing basically anything but just walking or running away. I'll admit this is a bit retroactive just given the fact that I'm pairing this footage with the Core Stone event right now, but like this actually is kind of fitting in a way. Like if it wasn't for the Core Stone theme sounding so like tribal in a way, which we'll get to, this whole section kind of feels like it actually thematically kind of fits with what's happening in the event. It's kind of freaky. You kind of look at everything chasing you and you're like, oh, this is absolutely disgusting, but it almost makes your spine shrivel up in a way that makes it really hard to run away from the thing. And so you'll do what I do a lot, which is die fighting these things because I'm bad at the game. That was a really weird little section where it went from what was already happening in the music, and then it transitioned into this like futuristic, techno-heroic Star Trek sort of thing. But it was only for a little bit before it then went right back into those really freakish sounding chords. And there's also like this weird abrasive sound that's happening in the midst of everything that sounds an awful lot like a grandfather clock if it was like about to break down and fall apart, as if it's been like a 100-year-old antique and there's like a haunted spirit inside of it or something. And so, we've stumbled upon the third categorization of music in this soundtrack, what I've just generally dubbed the escape music. The music that plays when you've hit the button on the back of Molly and are ready to book it the hell out of there. The appropriately named track, Robot Getaway, is a great introduction to this style of music. The little robotic beeps and boops, the pinging synth sounding like a radar ping signaling you to where you need to go to escape this death trap of a planet. All of this before bringing in some of the classic sequenced bass that we're all familiar with. The one thing that all of these escape themes have in common to me is a feeling of relief and congratulations now that you're finally able to get a move on, riches in hand, metaphorically speaking, mostly unscathed, and while only getting under mission control skin one time. While this specifically isn't really a product of the escape themes, the music that plays during your escape also creates some level of dramatic tension sometimes when, say, your scout goes down after falling off a cliff, or your gunner goes down after being overwhelmed by the sudden increase in six-legged fuckers. And it makes every moment that would have otherwise been brushed off as a casual death turn into a no dwarf left behind situation, because in the last leg of the mission, it wouldn't be fair to leave one of your teammates behind after all they've done and all they've been through. Ah yes, the Dreadnoughts. My favorite. Except for you, Hiveguard. Fuck you. Here's the next music type that we've yet to explore. The theme for fighting the Dreadnoughts. Basically the closest thing that this game has to a boss. Well, I guess that, and maybe the Caretaker, the Prospector, and Nemesis. But these things feel much more like bosses than that of any rival tech nonsense. And the proof is in the fact that they're given their own theme. And not just their own theme, but like 4? Each theme is also perfectly curated to sound horrifying, since really these Dreadnoughts are some of the ugliest motherfuckers in the game. Except for the bulk detonator, of course. Think about that thing that I said earlier about an unstoppable force slowly creeping towards the main character while they hopelessly unload ammunition into it. But give that unstoppable force the ability to teleport basically wherever they want, fire off explosive rounds, have weak points that can only be broken after 2 whole phases, and have the potential to down your entire team if you so much as stand too close to them. You little... Yeah, come back, I dare you. Dumbass. Oh, wow.
I'm going to Iron Will.
What the hell is wrong with us? Why?
We all just stood there.
Can I get a pickup, please?
Hold on, yeah, sorry, I'm getting a bunch of free health. What the what? What the hell?
I'll tell you what's wrong with us. We've been brain rotted severely, so now that we're actually really fucking tryharding, because we don't want to deal with it, that was a moment of just bliss.
Rad fucking gameplay, bro. Maybe the weirdest thing about this specific Dreadnought theme is the fact that there's this long ambient ticking section of the song, which doesn't necessarily feel like it fits with the big brooding boss theme I was talking about a moment ago, because the thing isn't really hiding from you or waiting for you to turn the wrong corner so that it can jump on you, but it does kind of give that vibe walking through a dark tunnel, no sound being emitted other than the breathing of your crew members and their footsteps, only to approach a big abandoned cavern, and boom, there's the Dreadnought. Maybe one of the only things to kind of take the edge off of the fear and the big brooding scale power of these fucking Dreadnoughts, at least for me, in my opinion, is the fact that Deep Rock is too fucking silly of a game, and I will be doing dumb shit with my friends, and somebody will probably die to the Dreadnought, or we will die to each other, or the Dreadnought will kill all of us like you saw in the previous clip, or a whole myriad of other cartoonish shit can happen. So while the Dreadnought is trying to run around and trying to kill everybody and is again this big brooding threat, I'm over here like, dude, can you please stop shooting your rocket launcher at me? Or my friends are like, hey, can you please stop shooting me with your minigun? And it really does take a little bit of the wind out of the Dreadnought's sails. But if you're playing the game by yourself, I'm sure it has a lot more power over you. In the world of Deep Rock Galactic, you don't really have time to scope out the area or do your research on the obstacles you might face. If you want to obtain knowledge about your inbound location or the challenges that might await you, you've got to suck it up and go down there yourself. And you better be prepared for whatever Hoxxes throws at you. You take your first steps into the cavern, and it seems awfully quiet down here. The only thing accompanying you being the whistle that sounds like it's coming from miles away. Caves are so horribly lit that the only options you have are your trusty headlamp and your semi-trusty flares. With that, you start your descent, one foot after the other, mimicking the repetitive kick pattern of the song. The only thing helping you to retain your footing. It sucks. It never gets easier. But you have to do it. You have to take the plunge into the unknown, and you mustn't be afraid of whatever stands in your way. At this point, it sounds like I'm just kind of talking out of my ass, mostly because to some extent I kind of am, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's maybe some level of like a Prince of Darkness reference here, just based on the naming convention, and the fact that it kind of, sounds like something that I would maybe hear in Prince of Darkness, and the reason I had to preface this with I hope it doesn't sound like I'm talking just random bullshit out of my ass is because I've never seen Prince of Darkness. That's a common theme here. I go, this reminds me of this thing that I've never actually seen, but I've consumed just the smallest amount of media to be like, I can get an inclination of an idea of what this is supposed to sound like, and I think this is what it sounds like. With Prince of Darkness, I don't even think I've seen the full movie, and I honestly don't even remember what it's about, so I don't even know where I pulled this from, but that's what I'm going to go with. Prince of Darkness fans, don't roast me in the comments, and maybe back me up if I happen to be correct. I'm going to be completely level with you guys when I tell you that Deep Rock's soundtrack is the thing that made me realize that if I'm going to continue to talk about video game music, I really should at least spend like a couple of weeks or a couple of months listening to the music outside of the video game context strictly for my own pleasure. Mostly because that little wee thing that just came by, I didn't know that that was in this song because I had only heard this song mostly in the context of the game. So, that proves that there's a lot of this music that I hadn't listened to for my own pleasure, so there's not a lot that I could have extracted out of it besides what I was hearing in the game, and what I was hearing from it when I've actually been doing all of this editing. But, luckily, that's what the post-commentary is for, that's what the overdub is for, so that I can kind of atone for my sins. Okay, when I said one foot after the other, I wasn't also referring to the bugs. What the fuck? We gotta get out of here, man. We're back with those dramatic-ass drums and that industrial clang sound, which is definitely a staple of this game's soundtrack in my eyes. I think what I've come to extrapolate from the kick, and then the clang, and then the kick, and then the clang is like, I'm saying it's like, this is the dwarven metal sound. Not dwarven metal, which sounds cool, but like, you know, dwarven steel, dwarven engineering. It's also like dwarven charge and march to battle, which is kind of ironic given the fact that these are escape themes, so it's kind of like charge away from the battle, charging away after a hard day's work and a job well done. I can't quite tell if there are motifs in this game, because again, I'm really bad at that, but I feel like this phrasing right here is a motif that I've heard multiple times throughout the soundtrack. Maybe this is supposed to be that kind of hopeful feeling that maybe we'll actually make it out of here alive. And combined with these slow and sparse drums, it feels very grand in a way. Very dramatic, and very fitting for the anxiety of making it out alive with a sliver of health left and no resources to your name. Immediately coming out the gate with this very fuzzy and warm synth. Kind of reminds me of this one preset that I like. It's called Warm Rain or something, I think. The soundscape very much has that vibe of the apocalypse, and the very subtle kick in the background helps add to that feeling. like as if after all of this time, all the trials and tribulations that you went through, the big bad evil guy came out on top and is about to put the final touches on their master plan to bring the world into total darkness or something cliche like that. I think the chord progression actually aids in that feeling more than the sound of the synth itself, because if I take the synth out of context, the sound of it actually sounds a bit more like stumbling upon a vast wealth of riches, or otherwise something that you were pleasantly surprised to have found. Yeah, sure, you're a little bit lost right now, still not totally sure where the exit is to this place, but hey, this is the silver lining. I love songs that start with like a simple piano and then quickly evolve into having additional synths that otherwise don't sound like they exactly belong in strictly piano music, but I'm also a really big fan of the other way around, where you have a bunch of really complex synths and a lot of warbly movement happening, and then as you're trying to kind of tone down the energy of the song, you remove those synths, only to find out that there was actually a really soft and quiet piano happening underneath it. After a couple of minutes, the song changes the vibe to this kind of chill wave feeling, kind of like something that you would hear in like some kind of nostalgic edit. It's also weird for me to call music that is this electric and this kind of resonant to be nostalgic. I guess I'm referring to nostalgia from my age group, which is like early 20s, and I especially find it weird because that electronic synth-wavy sound, I think it brings a lot of people back to like the vaporwave scene, that kind of like 80s retro-ish feeling. I think it's 80s, it's not important. It also brings people back to like a Windows 95 age, which is especially bizarre because like I don't know that a lot of people around my age actually grew up with Windows 95. I know I personally did just because I had a brother who was 10 years older than me, so I was like a little bit familiar with it, but even then, like I'm not super familiar with it, so I actually don't know if people around my age are as familiar with the kind of feeling that I feel like this sort of invokes, and that's fine. Like literally this entire section right here kind of sounds like something that I would have heard in some really obscure like PS1 or PS2 game. Something that, you know, producers would have sampled to try and turn into like jungle beats or, you know, chill drum and bass or anything to that caliber. Like the whistle genuinely almost sounds like the cry from a thing that is wanting for people to come and find it again. Like the cry of a game that is really old and really forgotten, but it still lingers in the back of some people's minds sometimes, and that whistle is like trying to reach back out to those people to bring them back in, to bring them to the good old days of that old PS1 or PS2 game that is so obscure that maybe nobody outside of their immediate sphere has ever fucking heard of. Behold the thunderous clap of the Dreadnought's ass! The use of almost exclusively strings for the first minute of this song helps to give this song a bit of an evil feeling, which is different than the horror feeling that the last Dreadnought theme gave us. And I would akin that evil vibe to be a bit more similar to a Disney villain who has literally lost their mind and has chosen to do whatever they have to do to accomplish their end goal, no matter how unhinged it might be. I think the slightly low fidelity sound to the strings also helps give it a bit of that Twilight Zone vibe, or otherwise some kind of really old, slightly cheesy horror movie. Think like vintage Dracula, I guess. I also didn't realize until right now that the strings are actually mostly panned to the left, which is just another fun use of panning that I wasn't expecting. I was only half joking when I made the thunderous clap of the Dreadnought's ass joke, because like the really strong downbeat percussion does sound in a way kind of like a lightning or a thunder strike. And you know, if I'm equating this to like Twilight Zone, Dracula's castle type, that's very thunderous. Quite literally, like the thunder is the big loud kaboom, and the lightning is the big flash that, say you're running away from said Dracula, or like a, I don't know, like a fucking werewolf or something, humor me here, and you're running through like a castle when this is happening. The lightning strike is happening, and only in those brief moments are you able to see them. And sure, that's not exactly what's happening with the Dreadnought, but it does invoke that same kind of feeling. Then we have this really big, whining, long siren riser, kind of akin to that of like, I don't know, my brain immediately went to like a Chernobyl for some unknown reason, before moving into the last big, warbly synth portion, which to me kind of sounds like sci-fi horror, almost something you would see in Alien Isolation, maybe. Again, a thing I've never seen, but this is just kind of what I'm picturing in my head. All of the happening while it's trying to be this kind of spooky, scary, blah, whatever. That's like very sci-fi horror-esque. This song is easily going to be the hardest for me to talk about. And the proof is in the fact that I wrote about every other song that comes after this in the soundtrack, so like 24 songs or something. This is a toughie because it's a 9-minute song that seems to go a lot deeper than most of the other songs in the game. It seems to be an incredibly beloved song by the community, and just the name alone is impactful enough for me to draw an entire fake narrative around it. The sparse radar pings at the beginning signal a mostly non-functional piece of machinery in the midst of these caves, only working just enough to give off a pained blip to those who might be listening for it. Is this the blip of a broken down machine? Is it a blip of a fallen soldier's scanner? That's for you to find out. I initially coined this song's feeling as, quote, being entirely ignorant to just how many have fallen in a place like this, based strictly on the name alone. And once the low ominous choir comes in, it really signals that you have found yourself waist deep in a cavern that is crawling with the most menacing evil imaginable, maybe even teetering on some level of eldritch horror. These first couple of minutes are scary because they're sparse, and they reactivate that primal fear that we all have of the dark. But as I mentioned before, things are about to get a whole lot scarier as the game makes it known to you that you're not the only one that's down here. The song takes a diagonal vibe shift with this only slightly more rhythmic section, and the sound selection across the board almost sounds like the wonder of exploring a beautiful lush cave. With just how much flora can exist down here, it feels safe, even if only for a moment. The song washes away that feeling with this droning bass, brings back more choir, and this time the song feels like it solidifies that subtle end of the world feeling. Like everything you've ever known has perished, and now the world sits silent, with you as the sole inhabitant. Of all of the music I've ever had to listen to, of all the music that I've ever done reviews for, of all the music that I've listened to in my free time, nothing has ever quite given me the feeling of having to experience the end of the world, or having to experience a nearly global catastrophe while still unfortunately being one of the few left who would have had to bear witness to it. Never before have I had to bear witness to a song that has made me feel like I am quite literally standing on the edge of the planet as it is ripping itself apart, as every inhabitant on it has perished away, and as I have to sit there idly watching it happening, realizing that there is nothing I can do to save it. Now the low choir and the high choir have come together and exude this weirdly heavenly feeling, or the feeling I assume one would get after being bathed in the sunlight pouring through stained glass windows. At this point, we've moved a little closer to the original feeling that was struck with the beginning of this song. We've been pulled back down to Hoxxes after nearly floating out of our own bodies. We're back to reality, and we've still got a mission to do. Leave no dwarf behind? Yes, chef. You tell me not to leave any dwarves behind, and I'll do my damnedest. I'll either pick up my fallen brother and get him back on his feet back to the ship, or I'll lie right beside him as I die to the creatures of the night. The beginning of this song kind of sounds like the feeling that one would have in trying to make an escape out of these caves, but getting just a little bit lost. Like, not so terribly lost that you're like hopelessly gone forever, but they're kind of like second guessing themselves if they should have taken a left, because it kind of looks familiar, but not totally familiar, and at this point they're not even really sure anymore. Now once that bass hit comes in, a little bit more fear is instilled into the character, because now they don't even quite remember where their fellow teammates have ventured off to, and they don't really have an anchor point anymore, so it's getting a little bit more nerve-wracking, but again, they've escaped from worse. The entirety of the second half of this song gives me kind of similar vibes to that one Mob of the Dead trailer, I guess minus the part where they all get eaten alive. You know that feeling of being surrounded on all sides, being clobbered, and having way too many creatures swarming you and still managing to break free through sheer skill and gunfire? It surely wasn't easy to get out of that situation, but you're still a professional in some capacity, so it's nothing you aren't used to. Hey, look at that! They're marching! Who? Why, the snare drum, of course. The marching band snare makes up for a great introduction to a song in a game where you're also in this little tight-knit group of people. You know, in hindsight, marching bands are actually kind of the opposite of a tightly knit group. Anyways, these synth chords also give off a heavy feeling of heroism, like the types of chords that you would hear when a band of heroes are gathering together in the face of a mission that they're not sure they'll be able to complete and all escape alive. This song is in a bit of a weird position because I've already mentioned that the chords sound like they're supposed to strike heroism into the hearts of the people listening to it, you know, for the people who are doing the heroic act. Somehow this song both sounds heroic and also dangerous at the same time. It is meant to pump you up for being the brave to march. However, you also have to remember that you're only being considered brave for your marching because of how dangerous the things are down in the cave. Luckily, it seems to further that point of heroism and braveness with the pluck at the top of it, but it's this weird clashing of ideologies where it is both trying to reify your braveness as well as remind you that there is in fact danger to be brave against. Once the song takes some time to cool down, the bass starts to descend in pitch, and the vibe of the whole song starts changing piece by piece. If we're continuing the fake narrative that I made about the heroes standing at the metaphorical gates of Hoxxes, not sure if they'll make it out alive, this portion sounds like the descent into the darkness. Even with that dark feeling, it doesn't feel entirely hopeless. And if anything, it actually feels a bit melancholic, and the pitch warbling of the piano makes it feel a little bit uneasy at times. Once again, I know not all of this music was made with the intention that it's going to be used on something else. However, it is a little bit funny how this is an escape theme, and it's like, what, if I check right now, it's like, I don't know, 5 minutes long? Yeah, this is a 5-minute long song. Your escapes should never take 5 minutes. Sometimes they will, but most of the time it's like a 45-second escape mission at most, maybe a minute. So it's kind of funny that there's a whole 5-minute song, which is why now the video is literally trailing into being back into the space rig, because there was no more escaping. Before long, those big drums come back and the heroic chords return, signaling at least some sort of conquering of the cave. And now it's as simple as getting out, which is usually always the easiest part. This new synth lead line also adds a bit of unique flavor to the end of this big, full section. Yes, I know it was present in the portions prior to it, but it has a bit more movement this time than it did a few minutes ago, and it actually gets to stray away from what it was doing the entire time, which makes it stand out and made me go back to that section a few times to re-listen to it. The last section of this piece is the final cooldown before the song is fully over. Some ambient pads playing in the background, and a ping-ponging synth following the same melody line. With the addition of this percussion hit, that sounds an awful lot like a gunshot, similar to maybe a 21-gun salute, giving us more references to that army-style marching character. Beneath the Crust, my beloved. The amount of times that I've heard you and quietly mumbled your bassline under my breath, it's not a surprise, because I'm really fucking bad at this game. I didn't even think this song was anything more than like 50 seconds because it felt very repetitive for those first 50 seconds. Not like there's anything wrong with that. You're only meant to hear it for long enough to peep your numbers and move on, and even those 50 seconds are still pretty cool. The bass riff is, again, a lot of fun to just mumble. I like the metallic clang on the downbeat since it once again fits into that dwarven engineering type of vibe. And the wobbly synth that also plays on the downbeat is very interesting to hear, and I don't think I put much thought into its existence until right now. After the minute mark, we have these interesting sliding synths that almost sound like something that you'd hear in an 80s sci-fi or alien movie, which fits surprisingly nicely with some of the 8-bit synths that we're hearing at the same time. I also really enjoy the headphone shaking kick drum / tom, because it feels like it has a lot more presence than a lot of the other percussion pieces that we've heard in other tracks. That very consistent tom rhythm then evolving into a bit more of a complicated drum loop was a surprisingly unexpected addition to something as synthy as this track. After we drop back into the regular bass loop, but with the addition of this other really sick metallic alien sound, it's one of those things that definitely sounds similar to stuff that I've heard in the past, but I can't quite put my finger on what it is. This music is just downright horrifying, and given its creepy factor coupled with the title, I really don't like where this is taking me mentally. I think the main thing that's giving me creeps right now are these synths that aren't super noticeable because they're in the background, but they're fluctuating between two different notes, never really sitting on one note for too long. This entire song just generally feels uneasy in its melodic content, sporadic in its rhythmic content, and the only thing that's super salient is the bass pattern, which is never a good sign for a song titled Ex-Beloved Character's End. Well, I sure hope the Deep Rock fandom doesn't get mad at me for comparing that warbly synth to the kind of warbly weird noises that would play in the very first fucking FNAF game. But I think it kind of does the same thing where it just kind of creeps people out, but in a way that it's really hard to describe. You don't really know what it's coming from, you don't know what it is, you don't even know if it's meant to scare you, but it's so bizarre and doesn't fit within the general scheme and nature of the area you're in, and it's really strange, and again, kind of freaks people out. These crystalline fragments definitely feel like they've been taken straight out of a horror movie score. They're really harsh and abrasive, they're not very tonal, and they ring out for so goddamn long, and they give me the shivers before quickly dissipating into thin air. One of the things this song nails perfectly is the idea of truly being alone. There isn't a hint of life anywhere in these caves. And while some songs scare you with the idea that you're the only one left to face off against whatever horrors lie ahead, this song scares you with the thought that not even the bugs you're used to killing could be making these noises. These noises are diegetic, almost like the planet itself is alive and is trying to kill you. In all of your years of killing monsters, nothing has ever made the types of noises that you hear in this song. No human, no bug, no machine. So what is it? Honestly, we have no idea. And that's the scariest part. I really enjoy looking at this song from the perspective of the planet itself being the threat, or the planet itself being the thing that led to Karls End. Because, you know, the bugs are just kind of defending their territory, they're kind of just defending their area. You're walking in and just taking all of the minerals from their area and killing the bugs that are trying to defend from you. But it's a lot more evil if the planet is trying to kill you. If, say, the planet is sentient in some capacity and is trying to hurt itself to flush you out of the system, whether it be literally destroying itself from the inside out, collapsing in upon itself, flushing the area with a toxic gas, anything. Anything's possible in the realm of sci-fi fantasy fiction bullshit, but it's a lot more menacing if it's the planet that's trying to stop you from doing the thing that you were hired to do. I love these glitchy sounds at the beginning. because they almost remind me of the ambient themes from My Friendly Neighborhood, of all things, totally unrelated games. There's the opening motif that this whole song relies on, and boy does it hit differently. The beginning of this song is weird, because while it does sound tense like a lot of the other ambient themes, it almost sounds tense as if the danger is deceptively close to you. Like, the cave isn't this horrifyingly empty battleground, it's actually deceptively full. The bugs just haven't come out to kill you yet. There's also this amazing phenomenon where if you have a piano just playing a top line with no chords being played by that same piano, you end up turning it into a melody that could be put in any Halloween movie and it would probably land most of the way there. No, this is not scientifically proven. If you want to test it yourself, go ahead, and if it fails, don't come at me. The constant chugging of the bass also gives the vibe of something slowly making its way towards you again, whether or not you even realize it's there yet. With the piano constantly returning back to this same top line note, it kind of also mimics that of the radar pinging that I've mentioned a couple times already, which, in combination with everything else that's going on, kind of strikes this feeling of, I don't know where the hell I am, I'm very lost, the radar ping is the only way leading me out of this place, and I don't even know where it's taking me, so the only way that I'm getting out of this situation is, as the name suggests, through sheer skill and ammunition. Okay, it doesn't say through sheer skill and ammunition. You get the point that I'm trying to make. The point is, like, I am going to have to fight tooth and nail to get the hell out of this situation, whether it be against the big, brooding threat that I may or may not know is real yet, or via the hundreds of other little tiny brooding threats that are likely to overwhelm you. When the song pares itself down, the long droning bass and the synth change, they both change the feeling of the song to something more akin of said mysterious creature watching you from the shadows. It knows you haven't seen it yet, and now it's time that it analyzes the way that you move, think, and fight. And it's been a while since I've talked about panning. This is a really incredibly disorienting example of it. There's this long droning bass that just hard pans right. Users listening to this song with noise cancelling headphones, beware, because that panning has a very harsh effect and will probably disorient you like it did to me. Okay, so we're back with the classic ambient and slightly unnerving soundscape of these droning synth strings. Also back with that radar ping sound, signaling that your objective is at least kind of near. Now for the hardest part, actually finding it. These ambient strings persist for a very long time and give a very specific uneasy feeling, like traveling through a now abandoned structure with at least some of its man-made components still intact and still nearly functional. If you listen closely, you can also hear some wind rushing past you, akin to that of cave breathing as they call it. It certainly doesn't prove that anything is here, but the wind is still one of the only things to be moving through here. Now we have a plucky synth, which isn't really doing a whole lot right now, besides actually giving some kind of rhythm to the otherwise entirely ambient soundscape that we've been hearing for the past, 90 seconds. Paired with that cave breathing effect, you can also hear vague fragments of that industrial clanging sound. Dwarven engineering at its finest, or something. Upon hearing this first switch up, my first thought was that it sounded vaguely similar to the soundscape of the first 2 minutes. Except this time we know that this fictional structure is in full working order, which makes it all the more bizarre that it's abandoned. Who would abandon something as magnificent as this piece of tech? I say to myself as there's literally no tech on the screen. This song has been a bit of an interesting one to go back and forth and listen to, because it has portions in it that sound like a battle theme. This portion right here, with this incredibly chiptune video game sounding synth, kinda sounds like something that you'd hear in a battle theme, but then it very quickly moves back towards the long drawn out strings of a more ambient theme. It's almost like you're running through a cave and, oh, there's a couple of bugs here, kill them. And then you're running through the cave again and you're like, oh, here's a couple of bugs here, blow them the fuck up. You know, in hindsight, that's kind of what happens in the game, so I guess that makes sense. This portion here with this fuzzy synth strikes a little bit more of that fascination that I've spoken about a couple of times of just walking through the area and just gazing upon whatever happens to be there. Whether you're a seasoned veteran of the caves or a person who's just stepping down in for the first time, there's usually something new for you to explore and find in the game, and this portion kind of feels like it reflects that in a way. This repeating synth into the drop has a very interesting character to me because it kind of sounds like confusion in a way. Not like fearful confusion as I've discussed previously, but almost like you walk into a room and you see a thing. Not even a bug, like a thing, a whatever, and you're like, what the hell is that? What are you? You do not look like you belong here. And then the drop happens and that thing lunges out at you and you're like, okay, shit, I don't know what it is still, but I need to fucking kill it. You know, I'm now starting to think that this entire song is actually just very reflective of the deep rock gaming experience, because it has a lot of emotions that reflect what you would have when playing around the game. It has a little bit of hope, it has a little bit of fear, it has a little bit of curiosity, it has a little bit of confusion. It has like a bunch of different things. It has a bunch of different emotions, and I think that's fascinating.
The Memorial Hall is where we honor the fallen. Feel free to walk around and pay your respects.
All this talk about some fictional situations you may find yourself in, and some very real situations you'll find yourself in. All this talk of weird cave noises that you've never heard before, and being sacrificial for the sake of camaraderie. All of it amounts to this. A beautiful 4-piece golden statue to commemorate those lost in these dastardly caves. This track embodies many things. It embodies sorrow. It is a tragedy each and every time one of your fellow dwarves fall. They died for a noble cause. Or I guess as noble as supercapitalism can be. It embodies heroism, because these dwarves still died with every last ounce of honor and dignity that they had, although many of them never got to start their own mining company. Lastly, it embodies the exact tagline of this soundtrack, gut-punching space dwarf synth goodness. If only the dwarves could hear the soundtrack composed for their jobs. The thing that I find fascinating about this song is the fact that it's a 6-minute track when you're only going to be in the Memorial Hall for 30 seconds. You run in, you get your promotions done, and then you leave, or you start your mission, or whatever. But the great thing about it is that the way that it's designed is that you're still going to feel its impact temporarily while you walk in. Sure, part of it is because it's comboed with the speech by Mission Control, but another part of it is because all these people died so that you could take your next steps into your promotion, so that you could become stronger. They died in the pursuit of your constant success, and some of us can only hope to lie down our lives for the people up ahead, so that way they may be better than we were, thus continuing the cycle of greatness, essentially. We have some downtime in this track as both a break from said gut-punching space dwarf synth goodness, and maybe a little bit of a metaphorical moment of silence for the fallen soldiers. We can't have total silence because that wouldn't make for a sound entering the soundtrack, but keep the notes light so as not to disturb the piece. After that moment of silence, we have one final bravado to not let the song end on a somber note. A fitting end to an ode to the fallen. You know, I was going to say something about the fact that it's impressive that they decided to make a song to commemorate all of the fallen soldiers, all the people who helped to make the game, all the people who supported the people making the game. And then I remembered the fact that that's not really the impressive part. The impressive part is that they managed to tie all of that in as a part of a gameplay mechanic. That's a whole thing that they showed on display to you when you go in to promote. And obviously the music just kind of had to match that energy. So it's not about the music being impressive, it's about the everything else that they made, and the music is just an aiding portion of that. The name I Welcome the Darkness is actually such a deceptively badass name for a track like this, and combined with the surprisingly catchy bass line at the beginning, it doesn't quite hit the same notes as that
death can have me when it burns me
thing, but it gets pretty damn close. The beginning of this song embodies the energy of a man in the face of thousands or more enemies, and finally getting to utter the phrase, finally, in even battle. This airy synth, not taking up a lot of space, gives the vibes of a spooky level theme composed by a person who isn't really that well versed in making spooky level music. Like, it's almost kind of silly in some weird way, despite trying to force at least a little bit of tension out of the player. Soloing the bass riff once again does a similar sort of thing as a delayed drop in a trap song, where you think the energy is going to drop when the bass actually comes back, but then you let it play out for a little bit, and then the high energy portion actually comes back. The bass was almost reifying the motif being played before bringing back a bunch of elements and then immediately pushing them to the back seat again. They also have this bizarre switch-up section that includes these synths that sound more akin to low-quality sampled horns than actual synths, and I point to them not only because the first time I heard them it threw me for a little bit of a loop, but also because most of the battle themes don't last more than like 90 seconds in the context of an actual mission, so I've never actually been able to hear these until pulling the album from Spotify. I think everything that's going on with this song points to a common theme I'm noticing with the battle themes, which is that it is a roller coaster, sometimes of emotions, sometimes of energy levels, sometimes of intensity, and sometimes of horror. I really do appreciate songs that have a really slow build-up, having one little element come in, and then having another little element come in, and then maybe having the first element open up a little bit more, and include more of those frequencies that were once suppressed, and then, oh, we've thrown in another element, and also now you can hear a little bit of the drums coming in, and now the filtering has been fixed, and there's maybe even another element coming in, because it just builds a lot of hype and gets a lot of people hyped for what's about to happen, and I'm unfortunately very sad to see that at the end of this song just amounted to the end of the song, but to their credit, it did leave me on my toes for a little bit, so good on them for that. The opening droning siren sound immediately made me think that this was a Dreadnought theme, and I was gonna make some kind of joke about the fact that the Dreadnoughts take fucking ages to show up anywhere once you pop the eggs, but as soon as I heard this kick-ass synth riff, I realized that I was entirely mistaken, and frankly that's a good thing. There's a reason why this song is often used at the beginning of deep rock analysis videos, and that's because it's easily one of the best in the game. I can't describe exactly why that is, but it feels like it embodies a feeling of looming while simultaneously pulling that pull yourself up by your bootstraps, we've got shit to do sort of thing. I also really love the dwarven engineering clangs in this one, a lot more than the others, honestly. I also really resonate with this comment that reads, "This song doesn't feel the same without the distant Glyphid roaring and the sound of the driller burning everything, including the damn team." As I've been a big proponent of this music being like 80% effective outside of the context of the game, but 150% potent once you get to slaying. I love that once the synth riff comes back, there's almost a phantom kick that you can only really tell is there because it's sidechaining everything else, despite the kick not really being audible. You know, one of my favorite things about Deep Rock Galactic is the fact that when you extract and make your way to the escape pod, one of two things usually happen. Either you speed ahead of Molly and make it back with like 4 minutes to spare, and Molly takes another 5 to 7 business days to arrive, or she finds a single pixel on the wall that apparently had an entire tunnel straight to the drop pod, and she uses this impossible feat of nature to make it to the drop pod while you're still struggling to figure out how to even get out of the final room of the mission. The other thing that I really love are the drums that play in this song. They sound almost acoustic, but they still have a bit of that wall of a transient at the beginning, as if the snare drum, for example, was mixed with white noise. Other than that, I can't actually speak on much for a while because it's very repetitive for the first minute and a half. I feel a little bit ashamed to say this, but I have absolutely fallen for the power of suggestion here because the majority of the beginning part of this song, I really just, I cannot emphasize how little I have to say about it, other than it just kind of feels like an escape theme. I've tied this with escaping in the video game, so I've tied it as an escape theme. But what I do find fascinating is the fact that there's 2 portions to this song, and the second portion feels a lot more kind of like something I would hear in battle. It's not like the musical content is making it sound any more like a battle theme, but I think it's the instrumentation and the synth choice that makes it sound a bit more like a battle theme. It's a bit more rough, it's a bit more gritty, it's a bit more tough, things like that. Eventually the song doesn't really take a vibe shift per se, but they replace what instruments are playing certain phrases, they change the drum pattern and sounds, and eventually incorporate more of that harsh, spacey soundscape. Lots of elements that kind of sound like they're being played in the background. Sounds that sound incredibly bizarre, or otherwise sounds that have a very rough around the edges quality to them. My brain just isn't attuned to properly describing music right now, and maybe I shouldn't even be doing this overdub, but like this second portion of the song, one is absolutely a bit of a vibe shift, despite what past me was saying about it, but also now with the really harsh brass or bass on the downbeat, and with all of the other general combined elements that come together, it feels like a song that has a little bit more purpose and a bit more deep rock character in a way. It just sounds more deep rock. Like, there's not a good way to quantify that but this song just feels more deep rocky, or I guess I should say, sorry, the second half of this song feels more deep rocky than the first half. At least, maybe it's just depending on the characteristics that I think of when I think deep rocky music. There's plenty of music that I enjoy that feels like it's distinctly split into two parts, and it feels like the first part is deliberately leading up to the second part, and the second part is just like infinitely better than the first part. And this song feels a little bit like that. Like, I'm happy with the overall arrangement of the whole thing just in general, but this does kind of feel like one of those things where maybe the second half is kind of meant to be the real meat and potatoes of the song. Although I can't really say that, because while I know these songs were very deliberately made to be at least like 5 minutes long, so that way it doesn't have to loop itself while you're trying to escape on a 5-minute timer. It's just an interesting thing that I tend to enjoy in my music, but I don't necessarily know if that was the intention with a song like this. Oh yeah, we're opening this with the most alien of alien sounds right here. Incredibly warbly, no movement, droning on and on forever. Then we incorporate this other fuzzy synth that will actually do something musically worth a damn. Everything here is incredibly slow, incredibly lethargic, and almost akin to the musical equivalent of tiptoeing, I guess. Plenty of ambient themes have presented us with this sluggish feeling, but in this case there's only 3 elements at play, so everything is incredibly pared down right now. Then we have some aggressively panned ambient notes to lead into the next portion of this song. This is a really quick thing, but I really enjoy synth music that has synths that kind of sound like human voices, or almost like someone trying to mimic the sound of another synth. Sometimes it can be kind of creepy, sometimes it can be kind of endearing, sometimes it can be whatever the hell you want, but people will notice. Right now, we still really only have 2 elements. The other aggressively panned ambient synth, and a bass that has at least something interesting going on when it decides to move at all. Really quickly, y'all have to know, I tend to jokingly be aggressive towards things like this. I think the song is actually pretty sweet, honestly. I don't know why I was being so aggressive in my description of it. I think it's just funny to be like, yeah, this bass is so fucking cool when it decides to do its fucking job. If I wanted to touch on this song's relation with its name, I could say something like the first 2 minutes reflecting the descent into a deeper core of the planet, whereas everything after those 2 minutes are closer to what the characters have found now that they've hit their destination, the deep. Right now, only the bass is giving off any feelings of hostility, whereas the synths are both signaling wonder and fascination, almost like when you first stumble into a lush cave in Minecraft or see an aurora borealis in real life. Why did I just try to pretend like these two things are even on the same fucking level? majority of this song so far is still keeping up that same wonder and fascination of finding a lush cave or a fucking Aurora Borealis again. But like, now that the strings are involved more, as it progresses into this into the second portion, it kind of sounds like it's being corrupted a tiny bit, or that like some of the wonder is fading out into the background to make way for all of the evil shit that is about to happen in the second half of the song. Which, I mean, corruption. We got the fucking lithophage event. That has literally nothing to do with any of this. I'm just kind of pulling stuff out of my ass at this point. Then we have another vibe switch to something that sounds a bit more sinister. There are more radar pingy noises that you can hear in the background, but the plucked string or kalimba or synth or whatever the hell is going on right now almost sounds like something I'd hear in Hollow Knight, which is strange because I've only played that game for like 3 hours. Still gonna make a video on it though. Then you can hear this screeching sound that almost sounds like a tea kettle that's about to explode before it just quietly fades into the background. And these last few moments of the song sound like the ambient noises that would play to accompany the main character stumbling upon something that is surprisingly magical, which is very shocking considering the weird ride that we took to get here. I've almost fully learned my lessons from previous soundtracks that I've analyzed, in that sometimes I think this song doesn't really feel like it belongs with either its naming convention or the level it plays on. And since then I've learned that sometimes that's just due to stuff not being made in tandem with one another. Deep Rock is actually an interesting story, however, because some of these songs were initially made with a specific vibe or stage or event in mind, even if the modern day use of those things would prove otherwise. In this case, the only example that I could find was actually 3 songs ago, A Distant Terror, which was apparently meant to be exclusively for Macterra events before they eventually scrapped that idea. I saw this video by Sniss like 4 months ago and thought, hey, he's stealing my idea, even though he had already done it 4 years prior, and found that to be an interesting fact that he pointed out. I say all of this because when I see a song titled Absolute Zero, I'm naturally predisposed to assume that it's the song designed for the Glacial Strata biome. And now that I'm listening to it out of context, I'm a little less confident in that theory, but the soundscape to me still kind of fits that vibe, with the airy pads and the bass that almost sounds like it's playing 2 notes at the same time. Everything sounds kind of empty and desolate in a way. When I look this song up on YouTube, I actually get a shocking number of people who seem to have a greater emotion for this song than any others. And I can feel what they're talking about, but I can't quite pinpoint what gives it that feeling. I think if maybe I'm tying this back to the Glacial Strata thing, there's just some characteristic with the synth that makes it sound kind of desperate. Like it's no longer about just the stage, and it's now more about a reflection of the player. A player who just met their untimely end as a result of literally freezing over, dying a slow and painful death. Their body etched into the icy landscape like so many before them. While I personally think that the introduction of the drums are a little bit unnecessary, they actually do a phenomenal job at finally showing just how rhythmically off the lead synth actually was this whole time, even though we couldn't tell because of the ambient nature of the first 2 minutes. Now that the slightly depressing sounding part is over, we are back with these aggressive synths, just like the Deep Rock soundtrack has kind of naturalized us into loving so much, but the way that they sweep past everything kind of sounds like an alien abduction type alarm. There is an alarm ringing for everybody in the metropolis known as New York that they're about to get fucking abducted by I don't know, Zod. I think I just was finishing watching Superman. Point is, it sounds very Alien-esque in a way. Also, it was less obvious this time. This is probably my favorite song from the whole soundtrack, so I was just gonna try and do everything I could to let the whole song play. Hey, it's that warm, fuzzy feeling again. The sharp synth is back. And this chord right here, dude, it's really good. I love the almost tribal sounding nature of these drums. And I also love the fact that this is the only song I've been able to tell so far that is in a 3/4 or a 6/8 time signature. Again, can't quite tell the difference yet. These low choir notes are heavily pointing to an underground religious sacrificial altar vibe. I know, weirdly specific. A religion that prays to Karl and burns bugs at the stake with the help of the driller or something. The massive pockets of space make these big piano and synth sweeps feel that much more grand. And in general, a lot of this song just feels really big and spacious. No real rhythmic melodic elements to speak of, a lot of ambient chords and pads, and the piano being really the only thing to play a semblance of a main melody, it just ultimately builds up to being one really massive chord. Listening to these songs more in depth, I really understand why people love the second volume of this soundtrack. Yes, yes, the first album absolutely nails that 80s synthwave note that they were looking for, but the diversity and the feels-good nature of some of the songs in the second volume is just on an entirely different level that I almost can't describe using any other words than just like visceral. Like my bones are gonna pop out of my skin. What the hell am I talking about? These chord progressions always end on such a satisfying note, and honestly to me that's what makes them feel just that much cooler. Hey, so you remember that hypothetical eldritch horror type BS I was talking about, like, what feels like an hour ago at this point? Yeah, so, like, this portion of this song, even though this is an ambient theme to my knowledge, this sounds an awful lot like a really big, grandiose battle theme that's almost, like, tense because of the nature of this eldritch horror thing. Obviously, I'm just kind of piecing together random BS that doesn't actually exist within the context of the game, but that's just kind of what I'm picturing it as. To me, this just sounds like a battle theme against, like, a massive, horrific monster creature that is so powerful that it is quite literally shaking the planet underneath you, and yet you are still having to try and figure out ways to battle back against it and not lose your footing. And I think the grandiose nature can also sound a bit like an escape theme in a way. It's not quite as pushing forward as it is gritting your teeth and literally hanging on by the edge of your seat, trying so much not to die while you're playing in the mission. But I think that's kind of cool that this, at least to me, this can sound like 3 out of the 4 main theme archetypes that I was talking about, and can definitely strike a different feeling depending on who's listening to it, which is apparently the whole point of music, I guess. I knew that I wasn't the only one who thought it was weird that this song didn't play during a Dreadnought fight despite having the word Dreadnought in its name. And I'm not just saying that it needed to be shifted to being a Dreadnought theme, because this song is just clearly too fast-paced for any Dreadnought variation, but sometimes the jokes just kind of write themselves, I guess. This song's execution is honestly fucking stellar. It is a little bit weird hearing both acoustic drums in this fast-paced rhythm, signaling something that requires haste and speed, combined with these really massive, big, orchestral-sounding drums, which are usually reserved for something that is a bit more slow and epic and grandiose. Overall, this track still conveys a lot of speed and urgency, and with only a minor amount of danger being posed to you, this is one of the themes that really screams, I'm here to kick ass and chew gum, where it's entirely pumping you up to get into position and mow everything down in your wake, hoping to God one of those people isn't your scout.
Yo, Eno Pearl hit!
Fucking what?! I know it's entirely inappropriate to compare music like this to a fully fleshed out boss theme in a different game. A boss theme is usually a lot more complex in how it's composed because there's a story that needs to be told and a relationship that you have to convey between the player and the boss at hand. Music like this doesn't really do anything like that, but Horde music exudes this very specific feeling that can't really be explained with words, but can be fully understood while you're in the heat of battle. And honestly, that's just what I love about this music. Hey yo, they got these synth chords sounding an awful lot like an organ? Are we in church right now? Is God gonna finally come down and smite me for all the crimes that I've committed against these bugs in their own homes? Or worse, take all my gold? thing that I find kind of fascinating about this track is that a lot of these bugs are kind of freaky looking, especially the bulk detonators and the dreadnoughts, and the divine feeling of these chords almost sounds like if I was a mad scientist who had been experimenting on creatures against God's plans, only for those creatures to come back as horrible amalgamations of pseudoscience that are beyond human comprehension, like a scientist's personal hell in a way. I've found another interesting phenomenon with the Dreadnought themes, at least in my personal experience, which is the fact that I think the opening part happens, and the opening part is the most recognizable to me, and the part that almost immediately screams out to me that it is, in fact, one of the Dreadnought themes. Like, I hear the first, 5 to 8 seconds, and I go, oh yeah, that's a Dreadnought theme instantly. So I don't hear a lot of what else happens in this song, mostly this bass arpeggio, and what's interesting about it is that just because it's one of the only things that's, happening in rhythm, and a fairly quick rhythm at that, it kind of sounds like something that you would hear in one of the battle themes. It kind of has that energy of all of the bugs rushing towards you in a very aggressive manner, which doesn't not fit with the Dreadnought theme in a way, because, there is still a lot of bugs that are usually out chasing you, and especially if you're dealing with the dreaded Hive Guard, you're gonna have a bunch of his stupid little fucking cronies on you. Then we go back into that kind of organ sound, playing those chords that kind of sound, like as if I walked into church and God himself was like, you have done absolutely horrific things with the power that I've given you. I gave you free will, hoping you wouldn't come in and muddy up all my shit, you wouldn't come fuck up all my animals, and now here you are fucking up all my animals. Now they are deformed creatures, and they're gonna kill you. Once again, the drums don't really add a lot to this track besides the heavy panning between the snare drum and the open hat, but this bass arpeggio definitely does add a lot to this track and solidify that deep rock feeling. Everything I said about the bass arpeggios just a couple of minutes ago obviously applies to this section, because this is still, basically the exact same section as just a couple of minutes ago, so I don't really have anything special or interesting to say that's different from the first time. It really does just repeat back in on itself, and I don't gain anything, and you don't gain anything from me just constantly talking over the whole thing, so I'm just gonna cut it short here. This song bangs. I thought that was pretty obvious. This is one of the few tracks in the game that I'm pretty sure are reserved for one specific situation, in this case doing machine events. And given how sequenced all of these synths and basses are, it sounds fairly robotic and machine-like, so of course it fits with the machine event. This song can actually afford to be incredibly short because the machine events are on a strict timer, so what you're hearing in this video is basically exactly what you get. Nothing too special, but it's nice that they actually have a song for one specific event in this game. It really goes to show you just how much love and care was put into this game, and its soundtrack by extension. Look, I know this is a video about Deep Rock's music, but I just want to take a quick moment to talk about the machine events, because I just think that they're honestly a really, really good inclusion for a game like this. The events themselves are super creative and force you to play the game in a different way from what you're used to. Just go melee all these bugs to death and you have a super melee power-up. Here's this giant machine that's sitting in the middle that can have 3 of 6, 7, 8 different configurations of different machines that are on it. That's really cool. The machine events in general, the machine aspects of this game, pretty freaking sweet, honestly. As a person who took like 2 weeks to understand interval training, anytime I hear this specific arrangement of notes, I can literally only think of the COD Zombies round transition theme, and I hate myself for it. That said, in this context, that round transition theme sounds vaguely of impending doom, like the impending doom one would feel while being caught on the living end of the apocalypse. The only difference here is that you deliberately chose to come onto this planet, so some historians may not look back on you with any fondness. Although I guess in the former example, there really would be no historians to speak of. These drums are the same ones that we're used to hearing by this point in the game. But I'm finding something kind of squirrely going on with the snare, where because we have 2 snares that are being used that are of somewhat similar texture, having them play back to back almost sounds like the second snare is a corrupted version of the first snare. It's nothing too important, but I guess that's just what can happen when you use 2 different snares of a similar sound profile. The pitch gliding synth in the back is also very reminiscent of the cave theme from Terraria, which I otherwise wouldn't point out if it weren't for this stupid ass meme that just keeps circulating every once in a while. Then these horns come in and take the main stage for a little bit. It's pretty cool. They're honestly pretty intimidating sounding, but I suppose that's exactly what happens when you just have low brass playing something like this. It all kind of just comes together to be akin of like a war horn, signaling a lot of conflict, a lot of bloodshed, and a lot of death. The spacey radar ping is one of the few things drawing us back into the deep rock soundscape, showing us that they at least still had the bones of what they wanted this soundtrack to be in the first volume, no matter how much they wanted to diverge from its original genre in the second volume. The Call of Duty Zombies motif is back, and unfortunately it now being played on a much smaller, softer, quieter instrument kind of like forwards the narrative of being deceived by light. You know, like when people are dying and it's like run towards the light and that's how you know that you fully passed over into the afterlife and, you know, maybe you went to heaven or whatever. This is like, there's the light that I know that I need to get to in order to get out of this dastardly cave. And then it turns out it was actually something else, and now I'm even deeper into the pits of hell than I thought I was. Just when I thought I couldn't get any deeper into the pits of hell, I am now currently deeper in the pits of hell. This is easily one of the highest energy songs in the entire game. It's quick on its feet with those bass arpeggios, it's intense with the aggressive synths, it's dwarven with those mechanical noises, and it all comes together to be a pretty hype piece. This song is the piece for the professional who loves his job. The music isn't tense or brooding. and it's not really fun per se, but it's the composition of skill and professionalism. Yeah, sure, here comes waves and waves of bugs, hoorah, but with how long you've been doing this, you can practically mow them down with your eyes closed and a smile on your face. This piece finds a great balance between being very intense with its crazy fast rhythms heard basically nowhere else, while not feeling tense or putting a lot of pressure onto the characters in a life or death situation. I'm also just generally a big fan of anything following a specific rate or LFO that gradually gets slower or faster, like this white noise mimicking that of some kind of machine starting up or shutting down. It does a surprising amount in the way of keeping the listeners on their toes, because who knows when it's going to hit its peaks or its valleys in terms of its speed. These fast percussion and synth riffs also make the song feel a little bit overwhelming at times, even if the situation at hand is very easily manageable. There must have been some kind of performance-enhancing drug that the composers of this soundtrack were on when they made this track specifically, and boy, I really need to get me some of it. You can kind of imagine the first 14 seconds of this song like a man who feels frozen in time as he witnesses the horrible situation he's found himself in, with the ticking of the clock fading away, and then... Now this feels tense, with the drop happening on the snare instead of the kick, the heavy metallic snare in combination with these incredibly tight snares playing a drum break that will no doubt be sampled for breakcore music many years down the line. The synth strings and the general high-intensity arrangement this early makes for an incredibly headbangable track, which is great, but unfortunately means that I am liable to death because I can't see anything because I'm too busy headbanging. This downtime section surprisingly does a lot for making the follow-up high-energy section feel that much more different from everything before it, partially due to the elements basically being stripped down, partially due to a different drum pattern, and partially due to a different sound selection entirely. I also can't be too certain of this, but I feel like once the drums all come back, they also bring in a much more distorted bass, which makes the song feel that much more heavy on the senses when the second drop comes in. I love the subtle percussion ornaments in the drums, namely this sweep before the snare drum hit. The finale of this song ends with a kick drum coupled with a repetitive synth in a droning fashion, maybe hinting at what's to come, or maybe nothing at all. You honestly can't be too sure with this game sometimes. You know, if the synths being played here were just a little bit more beefy, you could almost convince me that this was a Dreadnought theme, because the musical content is all there, but the brooding energy of the instruments just kind of isn't. There's one big thing I've noticed with this second run of bangers from Sulfus, which is that they tend to have these 45 to 60 second runs where the musical phrasing sticks to one thing, and then they do a quick pivot onto an entirely different phrasing, and then they do another pivot onto something else. And as a person with ADHD who would actually frequently unintentionally do this with my own music because I couldn't be bothered to just ride out the good thing for too long, I think it actually fits fairly well within this context. Although maybe I'm only saying that because these guys are like more of a professional than I am, so I can tolerate their jumping around more than I can tolerate my own jumping around. I guess to be fair to the composer, it isn't like a total 180 vibe switch. It isn't a total 180 jump into something entirely different. There are some times where it's like that, but a lot of it is, here's the big piece that's happening. We have taken out two elements so that we can add in something new, so that we can have a different vibe that still, you can still understand how we got from the original song. And then they might add in an additional little thing to make up for the second thing that they removed from the original portion of the piece. And then maybe one of the secondary added elements gets removed in place for a third different element, or maybe it gets replaced for one of the other elements that was in the original composition. And it's kind of just like adding and subtracting little building blocks from the song, so it's not like the most different sounding thing in the world, like you just made two different songs and didn't know what to do with them, so you mashed them together. So that's probably also why I'll give them a lot more credit. Oh man, we have been here for, frankly, way too long. I was gonna say an amount of time, too long. We've been slaying bug after bug, we've been dying a handful too many times, we've heard countless bangers, and I've managed to omit the word vibe and feeling over 70 combined times. It's been a great honor serving Deep Rock Galactic this day, except for that part where Mission Control revokes my beer license, and I'll commit to my final ascent, or I'll die trying. I will charge on dutifully while these marching band snare drums guide my metaphorical hand one last time. I can say with the utmost confidence that there is something so incredibly special about these escape themes when they turn something that is as silly and goofy of a game as this, where you can literally fire a rocket launcher that either will nuke an entire area or give you the ability to fucking rocket jump. And they have managed to craft escape themes that make you feel like your life, your actual life is on the line, making every little victory that you get just that much sweeter, making every little escape that you manage to pull off just that much better, and every well-coordinated team play that you make with your team in your pursuit of escaping that much more satisfying. Okay, never mind. I guess I have to go back down to the mines one more time. This event is honestly one of the only times that I've actually been kind of freaked out playing this game. Even on my first few rounds of Deep Rock, my first few missions, I didn't really get freaked out by any of the bugs. And that sentiment didn't change until this weird bulbous son of a bitch just showed up in one of my caves. And even then, I didn't even really have much time to be like afraid of it before I was blown into a million pieces. This event is truly something else, because the creatures that spawn here are unlike anything we've seen in the caves up until now. Although I guess that's kind of the point when new monsters are added to the game. I love the comment under this video that describes this song as tribal, because while I never pieced that together in my mind playing, that's also because I hadn't really had that much time to fathom what was going on in the music department, because I was too busy getting yelled at to drop my C4 on the core stone and dying every other round because I suck at the game. The tribal nature of a lot of these sounds honestly kick ass. They do a really good job at creating a different feeling from anything else we've heard in the game. And I gotta level with y'all, hearing songs with a tribal chant stab happening every once in a while, it makes me feel something primal within my joints and my glutes, and I can't do much more justice for explaining the feeling than that. Good shit, guy.
Coming home.
Holy shit, it's the loots. We getting medieval at the function. Let's go, dog.
That's Rocket Stone!
All jokes aside, this is an incredibly beautiful piece written as a bit of a swan song for the sound designer, mixing engineer, and the man responsible for the arrangement of these great pieces. Trolls. I don't know how you pronounce his name. My bad. How ironic is it that a piece as cool and celebratory as this is the one that feels maybe the most different from the rest of the soundtrack? Looking back on it now, that actually kind of makes a lot of sense, because you can have like a great send-off track, you can have some very emotional pieces with the soundscape of this game. We've seen plenty that are like that, but it's appropriate to kind of bring things back down to earth a little bit and be a little bit more low-key with your celebration for a man as great as him. Maybe it's the loots? No, definitely. Most of it is honestly because of the loots. But on top of that, it's also the sparseness of everything. It's not like the song is lacking elements or anything. There just isn't really a lot going on. There aren't a lot of drawn out pads. There isn't a lot going on with the drums, even though they are constantly chugging forward. And the main instrument is the lute, which makes everything sound a lot more plucky and consistently rhythmic. The song eventually just generally shifts into a lot more of this plucky sounding stuff. Almost like something that you would hear being played in like an old-timey tavern. Not quite the Abyss bar, that's a little bit too high-tech for my blood. It sounds like something you'd hear a lifelong group of friends playing right before they go to fight some war against elves or some shit. It's full of camaraderie, it's full of joy, and it's noticeably lacking care for their own safety, so long as they get to fight by the ones that they hold closest to them. I just had a bit of a no-duh moment with myself. The way that the strings are constantly plucking and chugging in a very consistent rhythm, it's kind of like something that would be, playing while you are in a horse-drawn carriage going on some kind of journey. Wait, hold on. Everything about this section right here encompasses this entirely fake narrative that I keep setting myself up with, which, I'm a big doer of that. It's almost like, there is a lot of evil out there. There's a lot of people who are trying to do terrible, awful, horrible things, and you recognize that you have the capability to step up and do something about it. You realize that you have the capability to get out of your comfort zone and go and try and make a change for the better. And so you kind of sit there for a little bit in your little fake tavern that I've made up for you, drinking your fake little beer that I've also made up for you, do, and you're thinking, do I continue to do this, or should I take a step forward and try and resolve these problems, try and be the change of the world? Obviously that doesn't really fit within the narrative of this game, because you kind of just are a dude showing up and just kind of taking shit from a planet, but you kind of get the idea that I'm getting at. I'm sure this is just a deadly combination, but like, the fact that you kind of understand the idea behind this song and the whole reason why it was created in the first place, and you can kind of tie that to the name of the song. The fact that everything for this first little while is just very raw and organic and acoustic really just like sells that vibe. It really seals the deal, and it feels oddly emotional, but maybe that's just like me enjoying acoustic music and also understanding the context behind why the song was made. Like, maybe these two things don't go together, and maybe my brain just put them together because it just does that sometimes. We have one more section on the way, replacing all of the old-timey tavern sounds with the classic DRG soundscape again. Here we can catch a glimpse of the droning bass, the gliding synths, and the other elements fading into the background, almost like these dwarves used to be the very ones drinking themselves to death in a tavern before moving to a life of high-tech space mining and all of the loots and fun times flooding back like a memory. There's something incredibly special about this game when they're cool enough to include one final piece as an homage to one of the two heads responsible for putting out this killer music and killer sound design. The final section is the biggest of any deep rock song that we've heard so far, I think. And, you know, I'm just making shit up again on the fly. This is the energy. This is the energy of millions of combined people who have picked up this game and have loved it to death, and the people who have come in and they've enjoyed the soundtrack and they've made mods and they've made videos and they've streamed it and they've given the game more exposure and they've paid to support the developers who have made this killer game. This song is maybe just like a little bit of a smidgen of love from everybody who's played this game for the innate subconscious appreciation that they have for the people who have done the work that they've done for this game. Godspeed, trolls. We won't let your hard work go to waste. This game is just great, even if you wouldn't be able to tell by my playtime when I started writing this script. I even went out of my way to lo-fi-ify one of the songs in the soundtrack because I thought it'd be pretty funny. This game has supplied me with my fair share of laughs, my greedy share of deaths, a few scares here and there, and a whole host of movement exploits that can't be explained in any other way other than to just show them to you. Yes!
What is this?
Good.
I'm gonna step on this like weird little seed thing until it. Oh God!
Until it kills you.
Yes. That was fucked up.
Who do this?
And
Who
also
do that
just
at
wanna
me?
get
Was that you?
It's a physics object.
Oh!
What just happened? What the fuck? What did I just miss?
I just got Alec killed. This soundtrack may be the best in its class for getting immersed into the world, with its masterful combination of high-tech machinery, aka synths, to get you in the mood to chew through some bugs whose home you're invading, and ambiance that really makes you feel on edge at all times. I think maybe one of the only things I would have wanted out of this soundtrack is a little bit more of that biome-specific flavor to some of these songs, and maybe having some songs be biome exclusive, just so that I can feel that much more connected to the biomes that I love, and at least provide some reprieve from the biomes that I hate. I think this soundtrack comes together nicely to make Deep Rock Galactic one of the best games ever made. It has one of the best communities with virtually zero toxicity to speak of. It has some of the most fun movement mechanics of any game like it. It's easily one of the most replayable horde shooters of all time. Its weapon customization systems cannot be rivaled by any other game of its dev team size, and even the larger AAA studios couldn't think of half of the most exotic overclocks in Deep Rock. And its soundtrack is just the cherry on top. It's insightful and uplifting, while also being incredibly energetic at times. It really is just a lot of things. And so to me, this game just might have the best soundtrack to suit its gameplay. Oh, fuck. Peter's getting eaten by Molly. You're the one who said wheeze, dumbass.